Okay, good afternoon. My name is Johnston from the Agri-Food and Biosciences. My talk is very generically termed Biomass Energy at AFBI Hillsborough. So I could really talk about anything, although I'll keep it on topic for most of it. I'm going to talk briefly an introduction, AFBI Hillsborough, who we are, renewables and what effect it has actually had at AFBI Hillsborough, wood chip sources and energy cost, touching on some of the talks that have been, but I think we can repeat some of it. And then finally, willow fertilisation and dirty water recycling, a theme which is very dear to my heart and I think hopefully will have some relevance today. Okay, so we are based up there in Hillsborough. We're on a 300-acre research farm. We're carrying out research on behalf of the Department of Agriculture, also some work on behalf of DOE and some private work. At our Hillsborough site, we carry out work on renewable energy in conjunction with our site in Loughgall as well. So we're talking animal and crop-based research, and the part which I'm involved in, my colleagues, is in land-sourced, land-based renewable energy. So we have a renewable energy centre built in 2009, which is you see on the screen there. A district heating system which transfers the heat around the site. We have 6 hectares of willow which we're growing for energy usage within the AFBI Hillsborough site, but we also use that willow, we fertilise that willow, if you like, with the dirty water that we produce from our farming activities. 300 head of cattle, there's pigs, there's silage, there's a lot. So we recycle this wastewater, fertilising the willow crop on site as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We have research projects looking at the drying of wood chip and the storing of wood chips, so we have drying stores on site also. There's an anaerobic digester there, 600 cubic metre AD plant running a 25 kilowatt, small kilowatt AD plant, upgrading to 100 kilowatt CHP unit. We have carried out some work on forest brash post-harvest and what energy we actually receive back. I'll touch on that again slightly. We also grow some miscanthus. We look at the agronomy of the crop. We also look at the combustion of the crop, the harvesting and combustion. So this completes the picture with the dairy parlour added in there. It's a big user of hot water, so a lot of the hot water we supply from the Renewable Energy Centre would be used therefore by the dairy parlour. Okay, so energy use on site. What I've tried to do here in the table is to show how this has progressed. 2008, 2009, before we had a renewable energy system on site, we were using 160,000 litres of oil, costing us £92,000 sterling, releasing 481 tonnes of carbon dioxide. Okay, so as the years have progressed, as we've installed the renewable energy in 2009, 2010, we've got a radical drop, and we've worked all the way down to the most recent figures, 2012, 2013, we're down to 80,000 litres of oil used on the Hillsborough site, which is a saving of about 240 tonnes of CO2, and as you see, is quite a considerable, nearly £50,000 saving. Now, this chart, what we're doing, I showed you the district heating system. Now, the district heating system doesn't go around the whole of AFBI Hillsborough site, but the parts it does go around, we can feed with heat. So this is showing, we have an oil boiler, so we monitor the energy output from the oil boiler, 500 kilowatt oil boiler. And of course, beforehand, this was way up here, and I haven't put that in this chart, but the previous chart shows it. We have a 320 kilowatt boiler as well, Froling. We also have a biogas unit, which is burning the gas from the AD plant, producing heat. All these add into the renewable, the district heating system, the buffer tank heat. There is some solar. There's solar PV. It's very small, doesn't produce any heat, just a little bit of electricity. There's also thermal solar, which is on the dairy parlours. It contributes as well. We have an experimental boiler, 120 biocompact. We use that to run any types of biomass through it to look at emissions and combustion, ash production. That's our experimental boiler. We've got the CHP, which is the 25 kilowatt combined heat and power unit running on the biogas from the AD plant. The electricity and heat together. The heat is true CHP. The heat is extracted and added to the district heating system. And finally, we've got a CHP, which is just we're just starting it to go, which is why you don't see very much here. Just a tiny little bit came out in 12-13, which we're just commissioning it. Now, wood fuel source, I think it's important. I mentioned that we have 6 hectares of willow which we grow on site. We harvest that every 3 years. Every time we harvest that area, we come out with 300, 350 wet tonnes. We'll take that chip down, we'll chip harvest it, we'll take it down to our drying facilities, we'll dry it, and we'll we'll burn that. Now we're looking at obviously at the research, the emissions and the energy retrieval from that wood chip, but that's actually only providing a small amount of our energy requirement, of our biomass requirement on site. So we're also, I've mentioned there, brash from clear felled sites, which we saw. Imported willow chip. We import willow chip from other willow growers in the local vicinity. We import forestry chip. There just isn't enough willow out there. If there was, we would buy it. But we import forestry chip as well. We also have some spruce from our own Forest Service. Well, it's not our willow, but there are Forest Service activities running on the Hillsborough site. You saw in the picture of the forestry, so we will use chip from that as well. And then finally, we've got willow rods from our Loch Goal site, which is where, I think someone mentioned earlier, it's where we carry out all our research into the genotype, into the the disease resistance, the yield. So it's all where all the trial goes from the new clones that get released from the breeding programs. So we'll bring those, instead of those rods just going to waste, we'll harvest them, chip them, import them and use them. And it still turns out to be a very cost-efficient method of heat. No one's really talked about willow too much, but we all know, I think, what willow is all about. But I've got a few photographs that say it very clearly. If anyone doesn't know, there's some willow planting on a nicely prepared field on a beautiful day. I don't know where that was, but probably was here. It's planting. It is a step planter system. It'll plant about 15,000 trees per hectare. It'll plant them at spacings in rows, and you've seen the rows are 1.5 meters apart, the double rows, and 3/4 meter in the single rows. We'll mix up all the genetics here. We'll plant 6 to 8 genotypes of clones, so we give as much genetic variability within that plantation as we can. After it's established, here we'll have a 6-7 meter tall plantation, which is then when that leaf falls off and it's ready to harvest. Okay, different ways to chip harvest. The top right shows the chip harvesting, which is straight forage harvester, adapted header, straight through the plantation, chips the chip. The chip then has to go to a drying facility. If it doesn't, it'll start to compost. We'll start to lose it. We'll lose the calorific value. There'll be health concerns, so we need to dry it. The bottom one there is the rod harvesting, which Alan spoke about this morning. Rods are harvested, they can be left the side of a field, they can be brought inside, they can be covered. Actually, there's a demonstration that's worth mentioning. There's an AFBI demonstration of rod harvesting going on a week today, I believe, demonstrating this machine and activity about 10 miles from Hillsborough, and then afterwards back at the Hillsborough site there'll be some presentations along the topic. So I was asked to get that in. After the willow started to regrow, we see the plant regrowing with its tillering out into lots of different branches. That's probably about a month after it's been harvested. Okay, so worth putting these photographs in. The top picture there is the brash harvester, the brash baler, bales of brash, and then on the right-hand side, those bales can be left to naturally season. And actually, the result from that was very successful. We got about 62 tons of dry matter. From a 25-year-old plantation, which, as you see there, the energy value is equivalent to about 30,000 litres of oil. On the bottom right, it's just moving on a little bit on that rod harvester. Harvest the rods, chip the rods. The rods will normally come into there and thereabouts 30%. So the chip from the rods, if it's well seasoned, can be stable and may need very little air blown through it. I was keen to put this out because we're talking about energy and cost, and just as a comparison, mains electricity, we pay about 16 pence domestic. Heating oil, it works out to be about 0.062 pence per kilowatt hour. I'm not counting boiler efficiencies here, but if we take that as a baseline, that heat from oil, we can see there how natural gas, wood pellets, and then chip compares. Now, chip at 25% at £100 a tonne is cheap. You know, it's half the price, a little less than oil. And again, I will say there are boiler efficiencies taken in here, but the chip grown and processed, I think, is the interesting bit. The chip that we're growing, we're growing it, we're fertilizing it, we're getting a contractor in to chip it, it's got very little distance to go, and we're drying it. The amount of energy and the amount of time and cost that we put into getting that biomass to a stage where we're actually producing heat for the farm and the offices, I meant to say the offices around that district heating system, is very little, and probably does turn out to be only about £0.015 per kilowatt hour. So it moved me straight on, just talking about that willow. We've got that 6 hectares of willow. We are growing it for energy, but we're also using it to be environmentally aware. We will irrigate automatically the dirty water from our farm activities. Now, it's an environmentally controlled dose irrigation system, which is how we run it. And it's consented, in the north it's consented under a water consent order, in the south it's a similar regulation instrument. This technology, though, is it's starting to expand from the research of wastewater from farmyards to municipal wastewater, sewage treatment, industry, commercial. even landfill leachate. So that's really the angle that we're moving with our research based on this particular project we have. Irrigation, what does it mean? Irrigation into willow. Well, what we have is large storage tank. We've got pipes, valves, automatically controlled solenoid systems which can distribute this effluent in a controlled, environmentally controlled methodology across the area. You can see, maybe in the left picture, but possibly not, through the willow plantation we have these pipes that go up and down, little yellow caps that irrigate this effluent. The one on the right is a dynamic photograph showing the effluent actually squirting out at the time. Here it is pre-harvesting, large photograph, hope you can see that okay. In goes the harvester, takes all the wood away, and you can see the pipe still there. It just was quite a useful photograph, nice day. I could see the irrigation points happening. The harvesting system works very well with the irrigation, and of course the crop works very well, needing the fertilization and also having the environmental security of keeping that nitrogen, phosphorus, hydraulic loading confined to its own area without it harming the environment. This has led on to a European project, last slide. It's called ANSWER, it's cross-border, it's an Interreg 4 project. The outcome of this will be to establish 4 or 5 commercial willow plantations along the theme I was previously mentioning, mainly wastewater. So this has been running with Northern Ireland Water in the north, Donegal County Council, Monaghan County Council, whereas by the end of this we will have 4 or 5 commercial plantations which will be irrigating, discharging to land in a sound, licensed manner the wastewater from failing or near failing wastewater treatment works. Looking into this as well is the biofiltration of landfill leachates, which is something which has been around for a while in Scandinavia, but to get our own regulatory bodies interested and actually understand that we have an awful lot to gain by using this technology for this method is a real winner. And there's some concerns about how could it be. We can't irrigate leachate, but we can prove it through science and prove that it's sound, and we can prove that our Scandinavians, they're not mad, our Scandinavian friends are not mad, they're doing something that actually has a real value. So we're pushing on with that. It'd be worth mentioning as well, these irrigation systems have probably led to the planting of about 100 acres of willow. Now that 100 acres of willow, the local authorities and Northern Ireland Water understand that there's a real need for this willow wood chip. So that's the background. Variable discharge, I won't go too much into, but really what it is, it's a benefit that's come with this project, and what it's done is actually it's allowed our regulators to understand that this technology can actually work alongside the environment. Let's irrigate it to land when the river's dry, and let's irrigate to the river when the river's in flood, so we can make the two things work. But that took quite a while to get, so we can get the best out of both worlds and cause less pollution discharge into the stream and into the river. So we're also examining the destiny of nutrients, pathogens, and the ecology on the site as well. And then finally a GIS mapping system. So that's just summarising a project which is leading out of the willow work that we're carrying out within AFBI. And there's a very quick photograph showing one real-life project being built. That's 3 big fields. It's about 14 hectares. There are 25 different zones. Each one of those zones will be irrigated autonomously, on its own, depending on what the environmental influences, environmental signals it gets. And I think, to be honest with you, this is a great opportunity. This land would never have been planted with willow if it wasn't for this project, and this local authority would never have this solution if it wasn't for willow. That's it. Thank you very much.